Zombies. Greetings, everyone. I have brought to you the Curse of Undeath, as you all have requested. Express delivery. I have your zombie stat block rework for you, and I'm excited to get into this because it's not just one zombie. It's a multitude of zombies that I have gave you variants for, just to give you some ideas on what you can do with zombies. I've also created a special one at the very end that I think some of your higher level players will even fear. So let us get into it after I give a disclaimer. Zombies are low CR creatures. They are meant to be mob monsters. They are not meant to be very incredibly overpowering and strong, unless obviously you make a big creature into a zombie. That's the cool thing about zombies, is anything that is living has the capacity to become undead. So keep this in mind when we look at the first zombie. But those of you that are old school dungeon masters that come from 3.5, I think you'll like what I've done with the zombie, because we're going old school with some of these traits that it has. So let's get into the first version. We're going to look at the 2014 zombie, and then we're going to see what we can do better. Alright, so this is the basic zombie. We are working with a medium undead. It is neutral evil, armor class of 8, hit points of 22, speed 20 feet, incredibly slow, but it should be. It's a zombie. Ability scores look good. They are immune to poison, but not to a couple other things that I feel like they should be immune to. Zombies should not be able to fall asleep, because they are not living creatures, so they should be immune to the unconscious condition. I would say they would be immune to fear, but then that would make it so that turn undead doesn't work, so we're not going to put immunity to fear. You can notice that there's a starking lack of vulnerabilities and resistances. Namely, I think zombies should have vulnerability to radiant damage. It just makes sense that they would, because they are inherently necrotic energy infused into a corpse that makes it walk around and do the necromancer's bidding. So I think it should have a vulnerability to radiant damage. Also, I think it should have invulnerability to poison, necrotic, and psychic damage, because psychic damage attacks the mind, and zombies are not living, so their mind is... It shouldn't be able to be attacked, in my opinion. Another thing, they should have resistance to cold damage, because they're undead. Cold should not really hurt them, but they should still be able to get frozen solid. So if a white dragon blew its frost breath over a horde of zombies, it should still affect them. Just, they already have low hit points, so they would die anyways, but just in case. There's another thing that I want to add to future undead stat blocks. We'll see what those are when I get to it. But let's get to the unique trait of the zombie, Undead Fortitude. So if damage reduces the zombie to 0 hit points, it must make a con save with a DC of 5 plus the damage taken, unless the damage is radiant or from a critical hit. On a success, the zombie drops to 1 hit point instead. So this is like what makes the zombie this unstoppable force that doesn't eat, it doesn't sleep, until it carries out the command of its necromancer that summoned it. Or if they were just roaming undead. We'll get into the actions. Now you'll notice D&D zombies in their current state cannot bite you. That is because D&D zombies do not spread the curse of undeath like zombies in scary movies do and in Resident Evil. Zombies in D&D are merely puppets. They're puppeteered corpses by necromancers. So a slam attack makes sense according to that lore, but I still think they should be able to bite something. It just makes sense to me. They should be able to grab something and hold it and bite it. Now, if you want to, you can add a disease to the bite, but let's get into mine and see what I did. Alright, DM Dungeon Mastery Zombie. Let's get into it. So I didn't touch the stats or the ability scores. That's the first thing that has no changes. However, we get into the resistances, etc., etc., and we do have some changes. Well, the first thing, damage vulnerability to radiant. It makes sense to me that undead are vulnerable to radiant damage, at least lesser undead, like zombies, ghouls, gath, etc., etc. Those creatures, they're born out of necrotic energy. Radiant is the exact opposite of necrotic, so it should destroy them easier. And then also, clerics and paladins feel more validated with their class choice because they feel like a badass when they're fighting undead, like they should. Cleric's whole thing is fighting undead and healing and protecting, so, you know, this is a cool change. I think it fits, it makes sense. But there's another change that we're going to see. Possibly controversial? I don't think so. This is an old school 3.5 style zombie. So we got cold resistance, which makes sense if you think about it. I think if I was playing as a player character and I seen a zombie, I would expect cold to not hurt it as much. I think that should kind of be part of the design philosophy for a lot of monsters, is if it doesn't seem like it would hurt it, it probably shouldn't hurt it that much. Now, they could still get frozen in a block of ice, or if they were left in a, you know, sub-zero location long enough, they would probably freeze and not be able to move anymore. It would just take a while. Now, here's the immunities part. This is what I think all undead should have immunities to. Every undead, unless it's intelligent. So we have necrotic, poison, and psychic. If the bard casts vicious mockery and insults the zombie, it should not work against it. There should be no way that the zombie could fathom that it's being made fun of. There's no brain, there's no thought process. It's all at the whim of the necromancer. It is a puppet, like I said. Now, necrotic, you'll see why it has necrotic resistance. And then we'll get into the immunities really quickly. We have exhaustion and unconscious immunities, which are new. I feel like it should have had that to begin with. Everything else is the same. We get into the traits next. Okay, so the traits. Undead Fortitude has not changed. It's exactly the same. I don't think it needs a change. It works how it should be working, in my opinion. We'll get to the first unique special trait, Vigor Mortis. And this is just essentially a role-playing trait, but it should have had this to begin with because it makes sense, right? So the zombie is sustained by necromantic energy and does not require air, food, drink, or sleep. It is immune to effects that would cause exhaustion or suffocation, and it remains active indefinitely without rest. Makes sense, right? Now here's where the old 3.5-ness comes into the stat block. Necrotic Absorption. When the zombie is subjected to a necrotic damage, it takes no damage and instead regains a number of hit points equal to the necrotic damage dealt. But we can see the zombie's got a little bit more up its sleeve than meets the eye. It's still a simplistic undead. It's still meant to be a creature that is not strong on its own. Technically, it still is strong on its own, but it's more deadly in groups, which is how they're most depicted as. A horde of undead is what you most think of when you think of a zombie. So we'll move into the actions here. It still has its slam attack, but I gave it now a grab attack. Now, a lot of my creatures tend to have grapples and stuff, but to be fair, it's a zombie. It should have a grapple. Now, this grapple deals no damage. So if the zombie hits with this attack, the creature, if it's medium or smaller, is grappled. Until the grapple ends, the zombie cannot grapple another target or use its slam attack, so it can only hold on to that creature. But it has a bite attack as a bonus action, which we will move into the bonus actions now, that does 2d4 plus 1 piercing damage, which is slightly more damage than the slam attack, and it has a higher bottom line in terms of damage because it's 2 different die instead of 1. So I think that is a much cooler zombie. Now that's just a basic undead. What if we wanted a zombie that did something a little bit different? let's get into a variant zombie stat block that I created for you also, because I'm not just going to make one zombie for you, of course, I'm going to make multiple. Alright, here's our first variant of the zombie. Everything is the same except for one special trait that kind of changes up how you play with this zombie. So, this is an infested zombie, and it makes sense that an undead corpse would more than likely become infested with insects that eat decaying flesh. So what this zombie is infested with is the swarm of insects, which is a creature in the monster manual. What it does is, if you critically hit the zombie for the first time, a swarm of insects erupts from its body, and it acts on its initiative. Or if you kill the zombie, so you drop it to 0 hit points, the insects kind of swarm out of the zombie's corpse, and it spawns a second creature in its place, basically. So it's 2 creatures in 1. Zombies are really easy to do this with. You could put pretty much anything. You could put an intellect devourer. Technically, I wouldn't do that. I guess that wouldn't make sense. But you could put an intellect devourer in a living creature's head, too. Yeah, this pretty much just adds for, you mix one of these in, or 2 of them in with the horde, and then, it kind of catches your players off guard. So that's one variant, the infested zombie variant. Now, some of you might be saying, well, I wanted something a little bit more. I wanted to spread the disease and turn people into zombies. Don't worry, DM Dungeon Mastery has your back, because I made something like that too. Let's look at that one next. And here is the classic Romero/Resident Evil Wood zombie, if you will. Now the challenge rating increases on this one, unfortunately, just because it's hard to make a zombie that can turn other people into zombies, or creatures into zombies, without it being a little bit more dangerous. So this zombie's difference is it is called the Zombie Curse of Undeath. So I would picture, instead of it being a disease in D&D, I would picture it being a curse, sort of like lycanthropy, but it's not curable, and it kills the creature that catches it, essentially. So the bite attack on this zombie is what's different, rather than having a trait. So with this bite attack, you have to make a Constitution saving throw, or be cursed. Now, you can increase the DC on this if you would like to. I made it just whatever the zombie's con modifier is, so if it's a bigger creature, like something with more constitution, it's gonna spread the curse easier. But anyways, let's get into how the curse works. So, if they fail the con save, they are cursed, okay? So now, within the first 4 hours, the creature's symptoms include fever and weakness, and they have disadvantage on saving throws and ability checks. Okay? Within 8 hours of being bitten, the creature becomes lethargic and has disadvantage on all attack rolls and saving throws. And then, after that, within 12 hours, it's too late. If it gets to the 12-hour mark, it's the point of no return. The creature slowly loses motor function and collapses, dropping to 0 hit points. No amount of healing can restore hit points lost in this manner. The creature rises as a zombie within 1d10 minutes. And then I have a little thing underneath. Before reaching the 12-hour mark, the curse can be removed with a greater restoration spell if the caster succeeds on a spellcasting ability check DC 13. On a failure, the DC increases by 2 for each subsequent attempt. So, if you want to run a campaign that's all about undead, you can even take this and turn it into like a modern campaign and just replace the curse with a quote-unquote disease instead to make it seem more realistic and grounded. But the reason why I made a spellcasting ability check is because if every cleric could just cast Greater Restoration and remove the curse, clerics would just be almost making it impossible for the disease to spread. Obviously, they don't have enough for every single creature, but this makes it so that if this curse came from a powerful entity, which it probably did, the disease is not, or the curse is not as easily cured as with a simple hand wave of a spell. It takes some, the spellcaster has to really focus, and they only have so many spell slots for Greater Restoration. So Yeah, it's a pretty scary disease, I think. Pretty scary curse. I keep calling it a disease, but technically it's both. It's a disease and a curse. A cursed disease, if you will. Hopefully you guys like that one. I thought that was a pretty cool idea. Now, we want a creature that's for higher level characters, right? We don't want just these low level mob enemies. We want something that's gonna scare the players to death. So I made something that is got an infamous reputation with it. So let's get into the final creature that I've created here. Last but not least, this is a completely different creature, familiar to most of you. This is the Ogre Zombie. Now, I don't know if many of you have ran this, but I gave it everything that the first zombie has. So it has vulnerability to radiant, resistance to cold, immune to necrotic poison, psychic. It heals if you hit it with necrotic damage, but there's a caveat with this one. This one is infested, but it's not just infested with insects. And that's kind of the trick about this creature. You can give an infested zombie any sort of creature infesting it. That's the cool, kind of the cool part. But anyways, this is infested with rot grubs. Now, if you don't know what a rot grub is, let me bring you up to speed. These are infamous, and this is not the reworked rot grub from the new Monsters of the Multiverse. This is the legacy version, the one I like. So, what a rot grub does is, when they bite you, they burrow into your skin after one round if you don't burn them off of you. And after they're in your skin, they're too deep for you to burn them. And then you start taking 1d6 piercing damage every single time the start of your turn comes around. And if you die while there's rot grubs inside of you, or if you drop to 0 hit points unconscious while there's rot grubs inside of you, they burrow into your heart and kill you instantly. But the big downside of rot grubs is they don't have a lot of movement speed. They move, I think, maybe 5-10 feet a turn. They have a movement speed of 5, and they have a climbing speed of 5 also. So, incredibly slow. If you stay away from them and you blast them from far away, you can kill them. But what if you put those same rot grubs inside of a giant, fleshy abomination that can move around, pick little creatures up and bite them, and infest them with rot grubs with their bite? And when you kill one, it bursts into swarms of rot grubs. That's what I did with this ogre zombie. So this ogre zombie is infested with rot grubs. If you critically hit it for the first time, 1d4 swarms of rot grubs erupt from its body within 5 feet of it, and they act on the zombie's initiative. If it's reduced to 0, an additional 1d4 rot grubs erupt from its corpse. Now, the reason why I said so many is because this is a much larger creature. I feel like this ogre zombie is probably incredibly infested with rot grubs. Now, you can take the rot grubs out if you want to. If you don't want to have the infested variant, it's pretty easy to do it. You just take the infested out, and then you change the bite to just a bite attack with piercing damage. But it's going to ruin it. Just try it out. So, it has a large morning star for its actions. It can slam, and then it has the bear hug, which, if you're familiar with my ogre rework video, it has the same bear hug. Now, the cool thing about this is, let's get into the important ability, the bite attack. It's called an infested bite. It's its bonus action. It cannot use this unless it is grappling something with bear hug. So let me back up and talk about bear hug. So bear hug is a grappling attack. So when they hit, they deal 2d4 bludgeoning damage as they grab you and they start squeezing you to death. The ogre can only use its bear hug on the grappled target and cannot use its slam or morning star attacks nor grapple another creature until its grapple ends. The ogre can still make bite attacks. Now let's get into the bite attack. Sorry, I forgot there's people that haven't seen this before. So the bite attack can only be used when he's grappling something. Now, every time he bites you, which is a +7 to hit, it deals 2d6 piercing damage. On top of that, the target is infested with 1d6 rot grubs. And then at the start of each of the target's turns, the target takes 1d6 piercing damage per rot grub infesting it. Applying fire to the bite wound that deals at least 1 damage before the end of the target's next turn kills these rot grubs. After this time, these rot grubs burrow too far under the skin to be burned. And then it says at the end, if the target infested by rot grubs this ends its turn with 0 hit points, it dies as the rot grubs burrow into its heart and kill it. Any effect that cures disease kills all rot grubs infesting the target. So now we have an ogre that's not just a simple ogre zombie that has a hit point pool that's really large and is just essentially an attacking bot. It does nothing but attack. Now, it can hit you with a Morningstar, it could slam you with its fist, it can bear hug you, it could bite you and infest you with these flesh-eating maggots. That's what rot grubs are. They are finger-sized flesh-eating maggots that live on dead flesh or inside of dead flesh. They infest corpses and piles of decaying matter, and they attack living creatures that disturb them. So, yeah, I think that's a cool, bombastic enemy that would absolutely 100% catch your players off guard. Which is the fun part, right? They're high level, they probably have cure disease, surely they do, or fire damage. So, I hope you like my zombie rework for you guys. We are going to be putting all of these stat blocks in the Discord channel. So join my Discord if you want to download them all for free. If there's mistakes that you noticed, call me out on them in the comment section so I can fix them. I can update these pretty much same day you call out the mistake. At least do it so I know that there is a mistake, like if I reworded an ability incorrectly, or if the ability doesn't work how I think it works. There's a lot of stuff that can be overlooked when you're trying to make multiple stat blocks. So yeah, this has been D&D Dungeon Mastery, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.